Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael wasn't the paranoid type. He trusted Grace the way you trust your own heart, without questioning, without doubting, without looking for cracks where everything always seemed solid. They had a beautiful story, the kind of relationship many envied. They showed up smiling at birthday parties, exchanged knowing glances in the middle of the chaotic routine of adult life. But that afternoon, sitting on the living room couch, Michael felt something break inside him. Logan, his best friend since college, arrived unexpectedly. His face was pale, his eyes avoided direct contact, and his usually firm voice trembled as if carrying an impossible weight. Michael thought it might be some personal issue, perhaps a loss, some bad news, but he wasn't prepared for what was coming. Logan paced back and forth across the room, running his hand through his hair, as if trying to organize his thoughts before saying them out loud. Then he suddenly stopped and looked at Michael with an expression that mixed guilt, pain, and loyalty. "Listen, I saw Grace last night, at a bar near Jefferson Street. She wasn't alone." Michael frowned, confused. "Okay, with whom?" "With a man. They were very close, you know. Very close." The silence that followed those words was so heavy it seemed to compress the air in the room. Michael didn't respond, he just kept looking at Logan, waiting for more, hoping for a logical explanation, something that would ease the weight of that statement and turn it into a simple misunderstanding. But Logan continued, "They were kissing, Michael, in a way you can't mistake. It wasn't just a peck. It wasn't a long hug. It was intimate, the kind of thing you don't do with just a friend or coworker. I didn't want to believe it, I swear, but I stood there, on the sidewalk, watching, trying to find another explanation. There wasn't one." Logan's words sank in slowly, as if each syllable were a nail being hammered in slow motion. Michael's world blurred for a moment, he felt his stomach churn, his hands sweat, and a sensation of freefall take over his body. It was as if he were falling endlessly into a hole that hadn't existed 5 minutes before. He wanted to scream, deny it, say that Logan had mistaken Grace for someone else, but he recognized that look on his friend's face. It was the look of someone telling the truth, even if it meant breaking the heart of someone he loved. Michael took a deep breath, trying to maintain control. His mind raced in 1,000 directions. Had there been signs? Changes in Grace's behavior? Distance? Strange excuses? Nothing came to mind, nothing that made sense. In fact, in recent days, she had seemed more affectionate, more present, sweeter, like someone trying to make up for something she had done. Michael's stomach churned even more. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice heavy. Logan just nodded, his eyes full of sadness. "I wish I weren't, but I saw it. I know that, if it were the other way around, you'd do the same for me. Trust is a castle, it takes years to build, but just one crack, a single crack, can compromise the entire structure." Michael didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he should confront Grace immediately, cry, scream, or collapse. But he knew he needed answers, and he didn't want them coming from anyone else's mouth but hers. That night, he said nothing, he pretended everything was fine. They had dinner together, talked about trivial things, and Grace seemed normal, natural. However, now with his mind on high alert, Michael began to notice details he had previously ignored, the way she checked her phone, the forced smile when he said something intimate, the brief absences during important conversations. Nothing screamed for attention, but now everything seemed suspicious. In that tense calm, Michael made a decision, he wouldn't confront her yet. He wanted proof, certainty, he needed to see the truth with his own eyes, so that, when the time came, he would have all the cards in hand. It wasn't something he had ever imagined doing, but then again, he had never imagined being betrayed. Staring at the bedroom ceiling in the middle of the night, Michael realized that something inside him was already changing. It was as if a piece of his innocence had died, and in its place grew a silent, almost cruel determination to find out how far the woman he loved had gone and with whom. He had no idea what he was about to discover. The next morning, Michael woke up with a tight chest and a heavy head, as if he had spent the whole night fleeing from an invisible fire. The coffee on the table went untouched, growing cold while he stared into space, overwhelmed by the choices he would make that day. He felt betrayed, but still needed, to see with his own eyes. Hearing it from Logan wasn't enough. He wanted raw truth, no room for doubt. So he got into the car, started the engine, and drove in silence to a small automotive electronics store on the other side of town. He chose the most discreet place possible, far from anyone who might recognize him. He asked the clerk for help without giving many details. He simply said, "I need a small GPS tracker for a vehicle. I need to monitor it in real time on my phone." The clerk showed him several options, and Michael chose the smallest, most discreet, and least noticeable one. He paid in cash, didn't ask for a receipt, left with a simple package in his jacket pocket, and a plan ticking away in his head like clockwork. That night, Grace was at home with a towel wrapped around her head, talking about a new skincare product she had bought. Michael pretended to be interested, laughed at a silly joke she made, and kept up the act with the skill of a trained actor. "I'm going to take a shower," she said, disappearing down the hallway, while he nodded and offered a subtle smile. That's when his heart began to beat hard. With the GPS tracker in hand, he went to the garage, walking with firm but silent steps. He unlocked the car door with the spare key he had kept since the first months of their marriage. The silence of the night seemed mocking. Every little sound, the creak of the wooden gate, the squeak of the doorknob, sounded like a shout in his ears. He opened the dashboard compartment, then the side panel next to the passenger seat. He thought about placing the device under the seat but opted to hide it discreetly behind the center console, between the stereo and air conditioning wires. It was a tight spot, invisible, perfect. As soon as he finished setting it up, he heard footsteps in the hallway. He froze, his blood ran cold, his heart pounding wildly. For a moment, he feared Grace had finished her shower early and was heading to the garage. He stood completely still, his body tense, muscles rigid as stone. He heard the kitchen door open, or was it just the wind, then the muffled sound of a faucet being turned on. Maybe she was just in the kitchen getting water. Michael wasn't sure of anything except that he needed to finish and get out. Breathing as quietly as possible, he closed the panel, wiped off any fingerprints with his shirt sleeve, and carefully got out of the car, trying not to make noise as he closed the door. Each step toward the living room felt like a life-or-death test. When he finally crossed the threshold of the house, he heard Grace call, "Honey, have you seen my hairbrush?" Michael swallowed hard, forced a smile, and replied, "Maybe it's in the bathroom down the hall. You used it there last night, remember?" She thanked him, and he felt a wave of relief. That was too close, he thought. From that night on, Michael's phone became an extension of his eyes. The GPS app showed Grace's car movements in real time, as if he were silently sitting in the back seat, observing everything. For the first 3 days, there was nothing unusual. Grace went to work, came back in the late afternoon, cooked dinner, and went to bed early, alone. No detours, no stops, no visible betrayal. Her routine was predictable and even boring. Michael began to doubt everything. Maybe Logan had been mistaken, maybe he had really seen another woman, or maybe she sensed something was wrong, noticed his watchful eyes, his staged tone, maybe she was playing the same game. But on the 4th night, things changed. Michael was lying on the couch, watching the phone screen, when Grace entered, already made up, wearing a blue dress he hadn't seen in months. "I'm going out with the girls tonight, just something simple, a bar, just to relax," she said, grabbing her purse and smiling, as if she had nothing to hide. Michael pretended to be surprised and casually said, "Have fun." The moment she left, he waited exactly 3 minutes, grabbed the keys, and followed along the parallel street. He turned on the tracker on the dashboard. Grace's car headed straight downtown. No doubt, it was the same bar Logan had described. Michael parked 2 blocks away, put on a cap to avoid drawing attention, and stayed there, at a distance, watching. The street was bustling, laughter, music, flashing lights. He saw Grace get out of the car and enter the bar alone. Half an hour later, she came out with someone by her side. The man was tall, wearing a leather jacket, walking confidently. Michael felt his stomach churn. He silently followed them to the parking lot, where they got into a dark car parked in the shadows. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he stayed and watched. Then, the worst scene of his life unfolded before his eyes. Grace got into the back seat, the man got in right after her. There, in the darkness of the parking lot, the car began to rock, the windows fogged up, the silhouettes moved in a way that left no doubt. Michael froze. It was as if time had stopped, as if the entire world paused just to witness that horrible scene. Anger burned in his chest. Without thinking, he walked up to the car, breathing heavily, and knocked on the rear window. The figures inside froze, the window rolled down slowly. Grace's eyes widened the moment she saw him, and before she could say a word, Michael began to clap, with a bitter and sarcastic smile plastered on his face. "Bravo," he said, like someone concluding a hideous play. The man, startled, opened the door and fled. Grace, in shock, pulled her dress up, trying to cover herself, but it was too late. Michael turned and left. He didn't say another word. The pain spoke for itself. That image would stay with him forever. Grace, half-dressed, fully exposed, trying to cover herself, while he clapped with his chest torn apart and his heart in pieces. The man fled like a rat, not even looking back. Grace remained there, trembling, lost, unable to say a single word. Michael left without hearing excuses, without seeking explanations. He left no room for doubt. This was pure truth. He saw her without filters, without excuses, without conjectures, just reality, and it hurt more than any nightmare. Grace didn't come home that night. She stayed in the car for almost half an hour, motionless like a statue, her dress wrinkled, her face buried in her hands. She didn't cry loudly, but she trembled like someone who had lost all footing. The sounds of people around her didn't penetrate. It was as if the world had gone silent to watch her fall. When she finally started the car and left, it wasn't to a friend's house or Derek's apartment, the same man who had fled not long before. She drove aimlessly for almost 2 hours, crying quietly, lost in her own remorse. She ended up sleeping in the car, parked at a gas station, her face marked by smudged makeup, her heart crushed by guilt that had come too late. For the first time, she felt exactly what Michael would feel in the days to come, betrayed by herself. Because she knew that Michael loved her, knew that he was loyal, that, even tired and sometimes quiet, he was the man who would always be by her side, but, at some point, she chose the path of least resistance, the most cowardly one. The next morning, she returned home. Michael had already left, the bed was untouched, his clothes were gone from the closet, his toothbrush was no longer in the bathroom. There was an absence screaming in every corner, an absence that said, "I saw everything, and now it's over." She called him once, twice, 7 times, with no response, sent short messages, then long ones, then desperate ones, nothing. Michael had vanished, as if he had evaporated. But she knew it wasn't anger that made him disappear, it was self-preservation. He was trying to breathe, and she had been the storm. She spent the entire day on the living room couch, legs folded, face buried in a pillow. She didn't eat, didn't answer calls, just revisited every step she could have taken differently, thinking about how much she had lost by not speaking up, not asking for help, not having the courage to say, "I feel empty, please see me again." And when night fell, she knew he wouldn't come back, she knew everything they had built had crumbled right in front of them, and now all that was left was silence, a silence she herself had created. On the other side of the city, he was now signing papers that would make everything official, no shouting, no fighting, just pain and a full stop to a story neither of them ever thought they would write. What Grace didn't know, or perhaps knew but chose to ignore, was that this marital tragedy, now spreading like slow poison, had begun long before that night in the car, long before the kiss at the bar, even before her coffee with Derek. It had started with someone she always saw as harmless, her best friend, Samantha. Samantha was the kind of person who always knew what to say, funny, loyal, vibrant, the type who makes you feel alive even on the worst days. Grace trusted her as an extension of herself. They had shared secrets since college. But this time, the advice Samantha gave contained something darker, something that, gradually, Grace would realize had been the final push over the edge. It happened during a routine lunch, at a small restaurant, empty wine bottles scattered on the table, when Samantha brought up the topic for the first time. Grace had mentioned feeling distant from Michael, no affectionate gestures, no intense looks. Conversations felt like administrative tasks, everything revolved around bills, emails, meetings. There was no room for passion, not even desire. Between sips, Samantha looked at her with a tilted smile and said, "Have you ever thought about talking to Derek again?" Grace frowned, surprised. "What? Why?" "Because he never forgot about you. We ran into each other a few weeks ago, he's back in town. And guess what? The first thing he asked was if you were happy." Grace laughed, trying to hide the discomfort those words brought. Derek had always been good at creating drama. Samantha leaned forward, elbows on the table, as if sharing a forbidden secret. "He told me he misses you, seriously, that you're the only woman he's ever thought about marrying someday." Those words echoed in Grace's mind for days. She knew she was vulnerable, felt invisible in her own marriage, but she also knew Derek was the kind of man who knew exactly where to strike. He always knew where to wound. And this time, he came with the encouragement of someone Grace considered a soul sister. That's how it happened, the first message, the first exchange of glances, the first coffee, the first mistake. But what she never knew was what was really behind this meeting. A few days after being caught by Michael and watching her own life crumble, Grace went to look for Derek. She needed answers, not just to understand what she had done, but to understand what he really wanted. Was it all for pleasure, or was there another motive behind his seductive behavior? She found Derek in a modest bar, far from prying eyes. He seemed calmer, almost serene, like someone who had already accepted his role in the story. When Grace sat down, there was a heavy silence between them, until she finally broke it with a simple question that carried all her doubts. "Why did you show up now?" Derek didn't hesitate, "Because Samantha contacted me." Grace's eyes widened, confused. "What do you mean?" "Samantha came to me, said you were sad, feeling lonely, that you missed me, that you still thought about me. She said that, maybe, if I showed up, you'd realize what you were missing by staying in this stagnant marriage." Grace held her breath for a second, bringing her hand to her mouth, unsure whether she was holding back anger, shame, or shock. "She told you that?" Derek nodded. "She said that, deep down, you just needed a push, that what you and Michael had wasn't love anymore, it was just convenience, and that I was the ghost still living inside you." She said nothing, eyes welling up. Samantha's betrayal hurt almost as much as her own. "But why did you go through with it? You knew I was married, you knew this could destroy everything." Derek rested his arms on the table, looking her in the eyes with disarming honesty. "Because I'm in love with you, always have been. What I did was wrong, I tried to be with you by ruining your life. Samantha was also my friend, Grace. This whole situation is a mess, and I walked into it knowing it was a trap." She shrank in her chair, pressing her lips. The shame was overwhelming now. "The point is, if you really loved him, you wouldn't have done what you did, and, if he was the right person for you, this never would have happened. What was left between you two was just the shell of something beautiful, we just sped up the end." She shook her head in denial, but deep down, she knew there was truth in his words, as hard as it was to hear. What Grace still didn't know was that the biggest revelation, the one that would change everything, was yet to come. In the days following this conversation with Derek, Grace felt like an abandoned house after a storm. Every memory with Michael hurt like walking on broken glass. The laughter in the kitchen, the comforting hugs after a tough day, the whispered plans in the dark, all were ruins now. She tried to move on, but the guilt hovered wherever she went, like a ghost. And worse than Michael's absence was the absence of herself, because deep down, she no longer recognized who she was. That's why she insisted on seeing him one last time. Not to convince him of anything, not to beg him to come back, but because she needed to face the person she had hurt. She needed, perhaps, to ask for forgiveness while looking into the eyes of the one she had broken. She called dozens of times, sent messages that he ignored, tried reaching out through family, mutual friends, until one day, she received something she never expected, a short message, from an unknown number, with just 3 words, "We'll meet tomorrow." On the afternoon of the following day, she arrived at the address he had sent, an old, discreet cafe on a quiet street. Michael was already inside. He wore a simple shirt, had stubble on his face, and a serious expression, but he seemed stronger, more centered, as if, despite the pain, he had found something solid beneath his feet. Grace sat down, at first without saying a word. The silence between them was thick. Then she took a deep breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. I just want you to know that all of this has truly changed me, and I'm sorry." Michael didn't respond immediately. He took a sip of coffee and looked at the cup, as if searching for answers at the bottom. "I've changed too, Grace. You made me look at myself, at everything I ignored. The truth is, we were lost for a while. You just decided to move on without telling me, and that was what hurt the most." She nodded, tears already streaming down her face. "I'm not here asking for anything, Michael, not even forgiveness. I just needed to see you one last time and say thank you, because, despite everything, you were the best thing that ever happened to me." He gave a sad smile. "You taught me what love is, but you also taught me what self-love is, and today I choose myself." She stood up calmly. He did too. For a moment, they looked at each other like strangers who had once been each other's entire world. But when Grace turned to leave, someone unexpected appeared at the cafe door. It was Samantha. Time seemed to stop for a second. Michael didn't react. He just looked at her with the calmness of someone who had finally seen the complete picture. Grace, stunned, stared at her friend. Samantha approached, serious, no makeup, visibly nervous. When she stopped in front of them, she said something no one expected. "Michael, I came because there's something you need to know, something not even Grace knows. I orchestrated all of this with Derek because I was in love with you." It was as if the air had disappeared. "I knew that if I pushed Grace toward her ex, there was a good chance she'd mess everything up. I took advantage of that, lied to her, manipulated her, and when you found out, I thought that, maybe, after everything ended, you'd look at me," Samantha continued, trembling. Grace stumbled a step back. "You, what?" Samantha, crying, looked at her friend. "I could never stand seeing you two together. I always said it was harmless jealousy, but in truth, it was obsession." Michael breathed deeply. Now he looked like someone who finally saw the whole puzzle, ugly, distorted, painful. "So that's it? I was just a prize in a game you created?" Samantha started crying, but he didn't wait any longer. He turned and walked out of the cafe with firm steps, without looking back. He left them there, 2 women, 2 versions of the same wound, 2 pasts that no longer belonged to him. But one thing was certain, he left behind more than a ruined marriage. He left behind the burden of trying to understand what didn't make sense, and in doing so, found something few people manage to find after so much pain: peace. Because sometimes, the greatest victory is simply walking away whole from a place where they tried to break you completely. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.